All right. G'day everyone. How are we doing? Pretty good. We've got a lovely day for it. That's what I like to see. You picked the right day. Apparently tomorrow is going to be a bit more miserable. So anyway, my name's Liam. I am from Aussie Arvos, which, well, what is Aussie Arvos? Essentially, it originated as myself, my brother, and a couple of good mates. And we just started filming what we were getting up to on our afternoons, after school or after uni or work or whatever it may well be. And a lot of it revolved around four-wheel drives and working on our cars, camping, all that sort of fun stuff. And it has formed into what is now a quite popular YouTube channel. And we make YouTube videos every week and go camping, still work on our cars, still love four-wheel driving, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. I don't know, have any of you heard of Aussie Arvos by chance? Nah, that's all right, that's fair enough. It's still got a long way to grow. I like seeing people that haven't seen it because it means there's broad horizons. So anyway, today I'm going to talk about, even though I am a young fella and you guys have got far more experience than I have camping, no doubt, I'm going to talk about the stuff that I've learned in my few years of camping. Now, it started when I was a young fella going out with mum and dad. We had the GQ Patrol station wagon and we had the Tambo pop-up camper on the back, and we did a few awesome trips out into Central Australia and up the East Coast and that sort of thing on the school holidays, us three kids in the back seat. And that's sort of where the joy and passion for camping and touring and all that sort of stuff sort of started. And then as I got older, I started taking more and more interest until I was old enough to get my license. And my first car, which again was a Nissan Patrol, a leaf sprung ute. And then it was up to me where I wanted to go and where I wanted to take myself places. And so I'm going to be talking about what I've done, what I've learned, and then maybe talk a bit about what I think are things that are essential for off-road camping. Like, I only do off-grid camping. So things that I think, things that you should be putting your thought into to make your camping enjoyable. So we'll start from the start. So as I mentioned, I bought a Nissan Patrol leaf sprung ute, and it was as basic as they come. It was a farm ute, and to me, that's all that mattered. It had a basic dual battery isolator with a lead acid battery under the bonnet, and I strapped the parents' angle fridge to the back and put a toolbox, and that was me. Away I went. High country, a few other places, trips up to the Murray and around Victoria, and I loved it. Stick a tarp off the roof when I needed to if it was a bit wet or I needed a bit of shade. And that was about at the time as a young fella, that did it for me. I was super happy. But as always, you start to find problems in your master plan and you think, oh, there's probably a few other things I'd like. And the first one for me was lack of dry space. Now, I did have the toolbox, but the fridge was exposed, and every now and again you get those wet weather trips and it's like, where do I keep all this stuff? I don't even have a place to keep everything dry, all the bedding, the pillows getting wet, the swag's getting drenched. And so the evolution for me was to get a canopy. So I found an old steel canopy on Marketplace, which lucky enough for me actually came with a cheap old full drive Super Centre awning. And it also had a solar panel on the roof as well, which I was pretty stoked about. And that was all of a sudden a huge level up in the game for me. Now I had a lockable box that I could keep the fridge in. I had an awning to put my swag under. And yeah, that setup on its own, just having that little bit of dry space and an awning, that lasted me for the next couple years. No dramas at all. It didn't matter where I went, I was content. And yeah, it was just a great setup. But as always, again, you start to get a bit comfortable with your setup and you think, oh, what if I had this? What if I had this a bit better? You can't help but think it. And funnily enough, that ute is still the one I have today. It was my first car, and I hope it's my last car, effectively. I never want to get rid of it. And it's actually changed quite a lot since those photos. It sort of got to a stage where it was a bit rough around the edges, done about 520,000 Ks, had no paint on it. It's pretty rough, and I wanted to rebuild it. And rebuilding it was the perfect excuse to readdress the camping setup. So a few things that I was missing from that particular camp setup that I came to realise was storage, but organised storage, where everything can be organised neatly and dirty stuff kept from clean stuff, all that sort of things, which makes camping really comfortable. Also, in terms of power setup, I still just had the basic dual battery isolator, and that was enough to run the fridge. But in today's modern world, where now we have phones and things to charge and girlfriends want coffee machines and all that sort of stuff, and then you're like, oh, well, maybe I should start going into different territories. So I started rebuilding the ute. I did a ground-up restoration on the ute, so chassis down. I actually put it on a coil sprung chassis while I was there because I didn't like the leaf springs. My back was getting a bit sore. And did it all up, built a tray, and with that came the opportunity for a new canopy. So the previous canopy was only about a metre long, which was enough for a fridge, as I mentioned, and a few dry things, but I figured if I'm going for the full camping setup, I was like, I want a nice big area that I can keep stuff dry and organised and also take on and off as I please, depending on where I'm going. So I went a 1600mm canopy. This one was aluminium as opposed to the previous steel one, which kept it a hell of a lot lighter. And then I went on to fit it out with a kitchen setup on one side. So I used an upright King's fridge, which at the start didn't work too well, but after a bit of modification, seems to be working well now and hasn't had any issues. I've got a nice big drawer to keep all of my kitchen supplies in and a little slide out stainless table. And I put a pantry slide in there too, which is a great vertical way of storing all my food to make sure it doesn't get squashed and roll around. Keeps it super organised. And this was stuff that I just built at home with. Luckily for me, Dad had brought home a bunch of plywood from work. So I went nuts building stuff. And that's pretty much what I come up with, and that's what the current setup is. Now, the other side has two big double drawers, which are great for just keeping clothes in, and I've got a big parts drawer, and then free space that I can shove big odd objects like a camp chair or whatever big other bulky duffel bags, things like that. And it's awesome. I've also, at the same time, upgraded my 12-volt system. I did make the jump to lithium. In today's age, I don't think there is really an excuse not. There is an excuse, but lithium is so cheap these days compared to what it was, and the extra benefits you gain from it in terms of battery capacity and what you can run off it is just huge. So I think everyone should have a crack at lithium if you're not already there. And I built a little 12-volt, a decent 12-volt setup with some C-Tech gear, which allows me to charge it all efficiently. I can put solar into it. I can monitor all the stuff that's coming off the battery with a shunt. And that is still working really awesome as well. And so that's the current camping setup. Take me to some awesome spots and awesome to camp out of, still with the swag. And yeah, been absolutely loving it. And the next eventuation after that went around with that setup for a bit, was awesome, but the only thing that I was lacking was a place to store the swag. Now, a double swag would just, and I mean just, I had to absolutely tug and pull to get a swag in and out of that canopy on the other side, but it did fit. But the sort of camping that we do on our YouTube channel, which is a lot of long distance trips where we're staying perhaps one night in one spot, pack up the next day, different spot. So the swag in and out, getting rolled up night and morning, started to wear down on me a bit, particularly when we're up in Queensland and we got all the nice wet weather, humid weather that the swag does not dry out in. And it definitely wore down on me. So after that long trip to Queensland and seeing the way the rest of the sort of fall drive and camping community was heading, I decided it was time for a rooftop tent. So the rooftop tent entirely changed the game for me. Not only did it free up a huge amount of space in the canopy that was otherwise lost by the swag, it's a hell of a lot more comfortable. There's a hell of a lot more room inside, and it can comfortably sleep two people, no matter what surface you're on. Doesn't matter if you're on rocks, that rooftop tent is always nice and comfy, which is fantastic. Obviously, one thing to consider with a rooftop tent is the weight that you're putting up on your roof. Now, with my ute in its current configuration, I have allowed to be able to pull the canopy and the rooftop tent off independently of the ute. And that allows me to say if I'm going for a short weekender where I think, all that extra weight probably isn't safe for the type of drive I'm going to be doing, I'll take the canopy off, take the rooftop tent off. I can go nice and light and easy up into the hills. Or if I'm doing the real long trips, perhaps interstate, or just plonking for a few days on the river or something, this is an awesome setup just to set up and super easy to camp out of. So yeah, that was actually down in Tasmania on the Bay of Fires there. A fantastic spot. And yeah, absolutely love this setup. And you'll also see there, I also managed to get my hands on my first ever 270 awning. I wasn't really sold on them. Same with the tent actually. I wasn't actually sold on them for a while. But once you sort of use it once, you get it. It's one of those things where I feel like you're I was a bit proud about, I don't need all that rooftop tent, all that 270 fancy stuff, but once you go to the dark side, there's sort of no going back. And yeah, it really is awesome to have the rooftop tent on there as well. So that's sort of where the car is currently at. You can actually see it. I've driven around the test track today and I'll be doing the same tomorrow, but that's the configuration it's in. And for me, I sort of still go back and pick apart, well, what is really necessary to go and do camping like this? Free camping all the time, going into, secluded sort of spots, just outside of the caravan parks, I suppose. And I suppose the first one for me, which I kind of touched on before, which I think for anyone that's going camping nowadays, is really your power system. And I don't mean you have to go and spend thousands or tens of thousands on some fancy 12-volt system. In all seriousness, even the still most basic dual battery isolators and a lead acid battery will still let you run a fridge, and that means no soggy lettuce, no off meat, which is absolutely huge. Because I think that's one thing, like I've still know people that, they got to go away and they bring the esky and it's a big ordeal and it melts and it goes all through the car and all the rest. So just having a battery to do that, and obviously these days charge your phone, that sort of thing, it makes camping enjoyable. Now, the other thing, sort of touching on the whole shelter side of things, I think particularly in Melbourne when the weather can turn on its head within the space of a few hours, I think it's really important to have a decent shelter that's going to keep you out of the weather, because no one likes camping in the rain and getting wet. That can make a trip go south very quickly. So for me, I originally just started with the King's, like the 180-degree square awning, which is what everyone had. And to be fair, they did work, but by the time you stick your swag underneath, and if the rain starts coming in sideways, you'll quickly find that there's not a lot of free space under there. This can be sort of combated a bit with probably awning walls, which work awesome because they maximise the dry space and protect you from the side. So that's absolutely huge to have that. What I noticed, particularly with like the 270 awnings, having that, wrap around really sort of extends the cover area that you have, in a sense that often the weather likes to swing around and come from different directions, and you can't, you can face the direction, like the car away from the wind, but then, it swings around and then you got to move the whole car if the weather changes. So having the 270 kind of gives you the best of both worlds, and that you're protected on two fronts in a sense. And yeah, I find that, and that actually, you can do your awning walls again with that as well, which that's another extension that makes it really awesome. The next one, I suppose, would be your sleeping arrangement. So I kind of mentioned before that for a long time I was a ground dweller, and I still think the swags have their place. Like they just work so reliably. And if you've got shelter, then, and the weather's pretty good, you're not sitting in the straight rain, they're pretty good. I do think, however, though, they can become sort of annoying and tiring, particularly now that you see swags getting bigger and bigger and heavier. It was actually at the point where the double swag I had was somewhere around the vicinity of 30 kilos for a swag, which is absolutely insane. You think, well, at that point, for an extra 30 kilos, I might as well have a tent on the roof for all the extra hassle and all the extra weight. And not to mention as well, the accessibility of rooftop tents and affordability of rooftop tents these days is absolutely insane as well. Like the one I run, the Ocam, for a rooftop tent, yeah, it's still going to cost you like a few grand, but it's not anywhere near as high as some of the other ones on the market. But again, I suppose that comes down to how much you actually use your setup and what value it has to you. But yeah. What was the other bit? Yeah, so anyway, I highly recommend a rooftop tent, but it's not something that's essential to getting you out there. All right. So, and I suppose the other thing that's worth sort of mentioning too, I think I said it earlier, that like you guys have done this far longer than I have, and just out of curiosity, did you guys go through this sort of evolution yourselves? Did you start with a swag and then you've worked your way towards, like, are you guys in camper vans now? Probably a few of you maybe, or are any of you still in tents, like 2-man tents or rooftops? Nah, probably all graduated. I reckon I'll graduate to a caravan one day as well. Maybe when I need the extra space and the extra bed space and seats. But I think it's kind of natural that there's this progression, kind of like the evolution of mankind. There's the evolution of camping. You'll start, right down at the bottom in your cheap swag, and then you slowly work your way up as you realise you want to get more comfortable, and you can, I suppose, afford a few more little things as well. So that's kind of my experience with off-road camping and what I've learned. It's only been a few short years and there's plenty more to come, and heck, you know what, I might do a full 180 and think, you know what, I've been doing this wrong for the last few years and go back the other way, or I'll jump into a camper. Maybe a nice little off-road orientated one would be pretty awesome, I reckon. But yeah, that's just about it from me. Again, I asked before, we've got a couple more people now. Has anyone heard of Aussie Arvos, just out of for my own curiosity? No, that's fair enough. That's good. More audience to encapsulate. That's what I like to see. So yeah, anyway, that's about enough rambling from me. That's my experience with camping and how I do it. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little talk. Hopefully you found it kind of interesting. And I hope you guys all enjoy your weekends and the rest of your day.